Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast. By a wing and a prayer, we are here. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. A lot of buttons pushed wrong, but either way, we're still here. Good night. Okay. So we've been getting a lot of questions lately about harvesting, when to harvest. So Miss Batavia and I, we dug deep and we figured I think, what do you think, a substantial list
Yeah, I think it covers the gamut
of
whatever that means.
difficult crops to know when to harvest. Not difficult to harvest necessarily, but some things just aren't as easy. So
Yeah, it's not as natural to look and say, oh, yeah, now.
yeah, exactly. So we're going to cover that today. Hopefully we get everybody in the right space. It's not as easy as you would think, and we don't want anybody to leave anything on the table as far as like size of harvest or anything like that. So, but before we get started, I do need to let you know, this is the Backyard Gardens podcast, and I am your host, as Batavia calls me, Young Ben, and I am with my co-host, Miss Batavia. There she is. Okay, if you'd like to support the show, you can do so by becoming a subscriber, Apple subscriber, Patreon, all that stuff. You can order some seeds from us. We're offering a special now, free pack of seeds with every order of 2 packets or more. So we're sorry, we just can't do it with 1 packet. So we will give you a free pack of seeds with every order that meets the standards. You can also hit our Amazon list. All the products that we use are in there. We are not paid for advertising for them. We just created that list for you. We do get a kickback from Amazon, just so you know. And come see us on YouTube. As a matter of fact, if you are watching us on YouTube or you need to watch, or you're coming to YouTube, let us know what crop you have a difficulty knowing when to harvest in the comment section down below. Don't you love that down below stuff? Okay.
It's so content creator-ish.
It is, but you know what? It drives the machine. It sucks. I hate saying stuff like that. All right. So we're gearing this towards crops that are to be harvested within the summer season, correct?
That's right.
So, and if you're somewhere and you're like, hey, I've already harvested a long time ago. Well, you know what? There's other people in the country and the world who have not. And by the way, remember we were talking about the France weather recently?
France.
Yeah, the France.
As in Paris?
Like how that's similar to my weather.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the person that I was referring to was like, were you talking about me? Absolutely. So thank you very much. And apparently somebody else chimed in and said that in Oregon, there's a section that's in the same latitude that has the same weather across the board too. It's very interesting.
Yeah, okay.
So,
I'm just checking my app for...
your dream locations?
Yeah. I don't know. The weather across these spaces, I mean, it's hard to get me out of Chicago in this particular month.
Yeah.
Like right now.
Yeah.
Because it's mild here. You know, it's not getting too hot. I've just realized I'm one of those folks that you can't please me with the weather.
No.
I haven't always been that way, but that's the way I am now.
I know about 98% of the people I know are like that. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's not perfect. It's too much rain, too much sun, too much wind, whatever. It is what it is.
I don't mind the extremes of the wind, the rain. I'm not even that upset about a lot of snow. I mean, I could do without it. But I have a sweet spot of like quite literally 75 to 85 degrees. It's turned out as I've aged. I'm just going to tell you how it is. When I was younger, I could deal with hotter weather more often. This morning, I had to sit down and cool off on the porch. I just need a break.
It's like not even summer
7
yet.
o'clock in the morning. Yeah, 7 o'clock in the morning. Like barely, it's 60-something degrees, and I was walking the block. It's just, yeah, I'm having trouble regulating my temperature.
I remember before my Opa, which is German for grandfather, my grandfather died, we'd go visit him. And he was really instrumental in my gardening and stuff like that as a child. And I remember going into his house, and it was hot as fire. You would walk in the wintertime, just start peeling off clothes. Like, I would show up to his house. It would be freezing outside in shorts. He's like, why are you wearing shorts? I'm like, oh, I don't know. It's just not cold to me. You'd have to lie, but I'm not looking forward to that. I got a few years, hopefully, until that happens. But, I mean, he would keep it an even 80 degrees in his house year round.
Oh, I mean, it was a sauna growing up. Like, I can remember there was a real big effort. So I grew up with my grandparents. I lived with my grandparents and my mom, right? And so, and you know, there, depending on the age I was, there are other family members that lived there as well. But I remember my grandfather's father. So my great grandfather was coming to Chicago to visit from Mississippi. And my grandfather was making every effort to make him comfortable. I mean, I can't do the quick math, but he had to have been in his 70s or 80s, maybe. My great grandfather, I don't know, maybe even older. But anywho, my grandfather was putting air conditioning units in the house. And it was a real big deal to make sure you had all of the doors, like the basement door closed, the kitchen door closed, like wherever cool air was coming in, you had to trap it in that space.
Yeah.
Again, because he wanted to make him comfortable. But before he came, and that years before, and after he went back home, you want to talk about somebody sitting on plastic furniture burning up.
Miserable.
Yeah,
Absolutely miserable,
man.
Nothing worse. Okay. Did your great grandfather garden?
Yeah.
I bet he knew how to harvest his potatoes.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He raised a lot of food and animals and children. There were a lot of them. 13, I think.
Good night.
Of my grandfather. Yeah.
Good night. Well, so that's the first one we're going to talk about here is potatoes. Mm-hmm. So potatoes are interesting because you let them grow. And I often get asked, you know, and this is why it's like number one, is because when do you know when to harvest them? Like, because I mean, if you're lucky, you can see them, you know, popping out of the dirt, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's time.
Yeah.
So when do you know to harvest your potatoes, Batavia?
Well, because I'm primarily growing my potatoes for like a storage crop, right? So for the potatoes I'm growing, I'm not eating them in the next week or two, not all of them at least. So I'm waiting until the potato plants have actually turned yellow, turned brown, died back is what we'd refer to it as, flopped over, like it looks like a dead plant. Because that's when the tubers underneath the potatoes, the skins have hardened a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm using the word hardened. It's probably like maybe they've gotten a little bit thicker or tougher. And that's going to help them store longer.
Well, they also are having the starches are build up the way they need to be too.
Yeah. Well, white potatoes we're talking about, right? Too, right?
Yeah, we'll get to sweet potatoes. Spoiler alert.
Now, I could harvest potatoes here and there earlier when potato stalks are still green, and those are referred to as new potatoes. They're going to be, in some cases, smaller, but definitely the skin is going to be much more tender. You could probably even scratch it off with your finger.
Yeah.
And I'd eat those for dinner like tonight if I was harvesting them.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't normally dig up too many of those because, again, I'm growing them for the purpose of storage crops. So yeah, and it's interesting because this year I have them in a front yard garden bed, and I put a lot of thought into that bed's going to be really ugly. You know?
Yeah, it really is.
You know.
Well, and so if you're curious, if you go to the Backyard Gardens Community Garden Facebook group, there's I put a picture of my potato bed, and it looks rough, but that's just the way it looks. You know what I mean? 80% of the plants are toast at this point. There's a few left, but I'm not harvesting until they're all gone. So I'll let it ride as long as possible. But it's, you know, like Batavia said, because I said something about the starches, because even if you let them die back all the way, the skin's still soft. It's that curing that you have to do afterwards that really hardens the skin up. But up until that point, Yeah, it's a big difference, and all the sugars and starches and stuff will get right. So you want to make sure that they're all dying back, or they're dyed back, basically. When you go in to harvest your potatoes, there should really be no plants of any substantial kind in there.
It's interesting you say that. I did a quick short video a couple of seasons ago, and it was like a section of potatoes in the backyard bed, one of the backyard beds, and you see my hand going in the dirt, pulling out the potatoes, and they're just kind of small, like red potatoes, red skin potatoes. And someone commented, like, "Where's the plant?" And I took it, and I don't normally like default to someone's being, like trying to challenge me and being maybe sarcastic in comments. I normally default to, most of these folks mean well. But I totally picked up on the vibe of like, yeah, okay, where's the plant? I'm like, that plant is died back,
You got busted burying potatoes from the grocery
yeah,
store
right?
in your garden.
Like,
We know what you
hold
did.
on. Yeah. And the irony in it, because, so first off, I didn't know how potatoes grew 15 years ago.
Mm-mm.
Right. Like literally no idea. Like I knew that they were underground based on like the dirt, that can come with potatoes, but that's it. That's all I knew. Right. I didn't know what a potato plant really looked like, 15 years ago. And so there is a little bit of like, okay, now I get it. Like I'm assuming there's some watching of that and then knowing that a plant can die back, and the actual plant itself, it almost like it composted in place.
Yeah.
So there were no leaves. There was some level of a stalk that probably was just out of frame in the picture or in the video.
Yeah, it gets all withered and you can hardly see it. And yeah.
Yeah.
Because the potato's not attached
it did look like
to the
I was
plant.
pulling potatoes out of dirt.
Yeah.
Which I was.
And the potato is not really attached to the plant. The original potato is, but the potatoes that you want are not. So, and just to quickly go over it for potatoes, once you get them, put them somewhere dry, hot, and let them cure for like a week or two. And that will help them get hard. And then store them with airflow in a cool spot. So
there's a space under my basement stairs that's like, it's unfinished, right? There's a door that I can close to it. So some years I've basically put them there. Some years if I don't have anything started on my seed starting shelves in the basement, I'll put them there. I can never get the absolute recommended temperature and, humidity level for some of these crops for curing, but I make it work. So.
Yeah, it's pretty natural to get the temperatures and the humidity here, so it's not overly hard. I put them in my garage, and the humidity is high, so it helps. All right, so the second one, which is another very difficult one, is carrots. So carrots can be very difficult to know when to harvest. The only thing I'll say about carrots right off the top is it's a good thing you can plant a lot. There's a lot of leeway in harvesting them. So I did a video on Sandy Bottom Homestead. Come check it out. And I was like, yeah, this is my carrot bed. And I was like, look, I got one starting to bolt. So I went and I was like, well, let's see what it looks like. I pulled it up and there was like no carrot. Yeah, and I was like, damn. And I was like, well, hold on, let's go check another one. So what I did, because, the difference between carrots and potatoes is the tops don't really tell you anything unless it's wanting to bolt. So you don't really want to look at the carrots and be like, oh, not yet, not yet. The only thing that will kind of give you a hint is the stalk of the carrot where it comes out will have some decent girth to it. Not like, a bolting type girth, but like, it'll be a little bit more substantial. So that's your only indication really that harvesting window has come about. Is approaching. Yeah. Other than that, it's what I do is I go through and I just dig around a little bit and look and see the shoulders of it. And I mean, the shoulders are the shoulders, it's the top of the carrot. And then you're not going to have like skinny shoulders and then like a large carrot that's further underneath that. So yeah, it's not an hourglass. Those shoulders are really telling. Yeah, it's not an hourglass. I mean, you'll be able to tell, and I mean, do some test pulls. Once you start thinking, like, do a test pull one up. If you need to pull another one up and see. So, carrots, you know, as you sit here and talk about it, it's not that difficult, but the actual getting into it is because you just really don't know. But like I said, you can stick a lot in a small space.
Yeah, the nice thing though about carrots is it's one of those crops where you can really harvest it at varying sizes, right? You know, so if a carrot's going to get 9 inches total, you know, if that carrot is only, and let's say 1.5 inches wide, if that carrot is 7 inches and maybe just 7 inches long and maybe just an inch wide, you could pull that out. I mean, it's all about what you want to use it for, right? So again, I'm harvesting most carrots as storage crops, storing them ultimately for me in the refrigerator once it's all said and done. But that test pool, don't be afraid of that. You know, take a couple out because that's going to let you know, generally speaking, what the rest of them are doing.
Yeah, don't think you're wasting your harvest. Because the one thing is, if you pull them too early, then you've absolutely wasted them. So
if you are pulling all of them,
if you're pulling all of them, so don't worry about that. And I mean, the trick behind carrots is, first of all, if you haven't grown carrots, you should absolutely grow them.
Yeah,
it's a really
satisfying crop.
It is.
You got to put something into it, you know. When it comes to, I wouldn't say it's a very popular crop to grow, not necessarily the easiest to get started. And there is a little bit more kind of elbow grease in. This was so closer to when we were recording this. I was thinning carrots, which might be my least favorite thing to do in the garden.
Yeah,
I think it's probably my least favorite. But I've become more obedient when it comes to sowing heavily to begin with. But that requires some work. But once you've done that, I think you're kind of in that smooth sailing category. And so I brought it up because I ended up, since they were so young, eating the carrot tops because they weren't really that carroty. You know, like, you know how carrot tops can have a strong flavor, but it's because they were so young. You know, I was chopping them up, putting them in eggs, chopping them up, putting them in salads. You know, just trying not to be wasteful, but also trying to enjoy something a little bit different. But I'm so looking forward to a good carrot year. It's written that I have a good carrot year. It seems like every 1 to 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Like, you know, so every other year or every third year.
Yeah, I really worked on my spacing this year, so hopefully that will solve my problem. The one thing that it's not going to tell you is the length of the carrot. So the only way to do that is by pulling it. But, you know, if you pay attention to the variety you're using and stuff like that, then you'll have an idea of how long it should be. But once it gets to that width at the top that you're looking for, or that's realistic
for that
variety, you know, if you plant a baby carrot variety, you're not going to get a giant carrot. So understand that. Yeah. I grow carrots to can, so that's we're different in that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I don't know. We'll see one year. I'm not even going to pretend as if I'm going to do it this year as far as canning carrots, because it's going to be one of those things like, do I really enjoy it? And I know that carrots that I pull out of the crisper I'm going to enjoy. The test pull doesn't guarantee the taste of a carrot either. So carrots are one of these things, and there are a couple of crops on our list today. The bigger isn't always the better, right? The bigger isn't always the better.
That goes for everything on this list. For the most part.
Well, remember I lost the list.
Yeah, you did lose the list, but I'm looking at the I'm looking at the list, and across the board, bigger is not always better. So,
and that's a lesson I had to learn.
It's a hard lesson,
an embarrassing way.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you once we get to that crop. I do remember that one.
Okay, so well, that's carrots. Now we talked about potatoes. But one of my favorites is sweet potatoes. And the difference between the two are the greens on top will give you absolutely no indication whether they are ready to be harvested or not. So you cannot go buy the greens for sweet potatoes. If you don't grow sweet potatoes, my question is, why are you not growing sweet potatoes? It's a well worth it crop. It stores well, all that stuff. So you definitely want to try and do that. But just know, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, have you ever seen the tops indicate to you, hey, it's time to harvest?
No.
Okay. I asked you that for a
Now,
specific reason, but go ahead.
well, I don't know the reason you asked me, but my sweet potato growing is a little bit different than young Ben's based on my climate.
That's why I asked you.
Yeah, and I am pulling sweet potatoes out before the frost generally, right? And in a lot of cases, I still have some pretty green tops, pretty green leaves. Sometimes there's a little bit of discoloration based on the weather getting cooler. But I've not, over the last handful of years that I've been growing them, I've not noticed any difference in this year. I have completely green tops and I'm pulling the sweet potatoes out compared to there's a little bit of dying off. This is a crop that I think absolutely count your days. Not in the comical way of count your days, insert, corporation, but count the number of days from planting once those plants started to actually grow to harvest for that variety. And I think that that's probably going to be your better indicator as far as when to harvest. It's possible to do a test pull, not as easy as it was with carrots, but you can start moving some soil around to see, hey, do I have something actually underneath here? Which chances are you do. Some I've seen in your garden, and it's happened in my garden too, where sweet potatoes actually start popping their heads up out of the soil.
Yeah, it's I don't do test pulls at all. I've never done a test pull, even my first year as a sweet potato growing. I just let it grow. So Batavia is 100% correct. It's counting the days.
Hey.
So yeah, there it is.
Let's take a drink.
There it is. Everybody take a drink. Here we go. Okay. In all seriousness though, it's really comes down to the time and then the way you plant them. So if you give them space and then on top of that, you give them the right fertilizer, and usually what that means is give them some bone meal. And then low nitrogen fertilizers. Give them some bone meal at planting only, and then just a basic fertilizer afterwards. Your potatoes are going to grow, and you're going to get them. They grow a lot deeper than white potatoes, typically speaking. Yeah. I find that when I harvest my sweet potatoes, I have to dig deeper, and I'll find hidden potatoes than I would if I had my white potatoes and stuff like that. So that's really, really important. As far as the greens and then the time frame that Batavia mentioned, it's really tricky because when you harvest them, you want to be within like 90 to 120 days. There's a 30-day window. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Usually I like to keep it right around 100. But after that, the reason why we harvest them earlier, so let's say that something happened and we were just late and the frost was coming, I would harvest them earlier because the curing is easier. So this is another crop that you really need to cure, unlike white potatoes. Well, not unlike, but very similar. The starches and the sugars in the sweet potato really come out when you cure them. So it's not like a white potato where it does start to change some, but we want that creamy texture. And so that creamy texture comes from a few things. It comes from lack of water. So you don't want to overwater your potatoes. Usually about a month before we want to harvest our potatoes, we will actually cut the water off in that bed for the most part. We may, water at 50% less, 25%. No, 75% less, something like that. But that will help trigger those sugars to come out. And then during the curing process, but if you do it early enough, your climate will give you that curing process naturally, and you don't have to do anything super crazy as far as like running heaters and stuff like that. So keep that in mind as you get ready to harvest your sweet potatoes.
And there's, in my area, based on the time, so I'm harvesting sweet potatoes, let's call it sometime in October. Like that's a good time. My average first frost is going to be, I think it's November 1st now. Prior it was like October 31st, or right at the end of October. And so some people will say let a light frost hit the leaves and that helps to sweeten them. But I just never really take that chance if I don't take the chance if my schedule allows. But I mentioned October because I am also monitoring how much water the space is getting where I've planted these sweet potatoes. I don't want it to continue just to get rained on, right? So I'm generally going to be over 100 days. I kind of make a whole project out of it because that's what I do.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of, like, last year, I think it was the first year where I knew I was like weeks later than I wanted to be. And you just want to make sure that you're not creating a situation where your potatoes are going to be drier than you want. I know it's kind of sounding like I'm talking out of both sides, but I don't want to pull old sweet potatoes out of my garden space. So
Well, and a lot of times the dryness comes from, again, overwatering. And then if you get skinny sweet potatoes, it's because you didn't have the right nutrients. So that's where that bone meal at planting comes in. So I just went in yesterday, actually. My sweet potatoes have been in the ground like a week or two. And I just I scratched some bone meal into the surface. And then that's basically, I'll give it another dose of fertilizer right before I mulch it. And then I'm just going to let it ride. And it works wonders. So, but you don't want to get, I mean, it's not that you don't want to, but those big, giant, as I call date night potatoes, those are good, but they're not great. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are for pies. Those are for, mashed sweet potatoes, something like that. But if you just, like, I mean, I'm crazy, I guess. I like to take a sweet potato. What we'll do is we'll go out for the day, and I'll throw sweet potatoes in the toaster oven on a timer, and then we'll come back and we'll have sweet potatoes ready for us, and we just eat them straight up. But, if you get them too big, you do need to cook. You don't need to. You can do whatever you want, but you can make them in other ways that make them better. So,
yeah, I think just one final note when it comes to the sweet potatoes in my space, and if 100 days is 100 days, 120 days is 120 days, they've spent quite a lot of time in that space.
Yeah.
And this is one of those. And carrots are similar as well. I don't do test pulls for sweet potatoes because it's harder to even separate the sweet potato from the rest of its sisters and brothers.
Yeah.
Like, when you look at where it's connected to the plant. So I don't want to prematurely pull too much up trying to do a test pull.
Yeah.
Right. So it's one of those things I do take a little bit more care with, because the bonus is it's been really hands off most of the growing season.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't mind at the end giving it a little bit more care.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a self-professed sweet potato expert. And the only reason why I can say that is because it's an easy crop to grow. It's pretty hands off. So, yeah, it's just, it's one of the, and I've had good years and bad years. But yeah, so don't count on the greens. And look, stop eating the greens. Just stop. Okay. All right. So the next one is right up Batavia's alley, okra.
Oh, yeah. All right. Because I love a good story. Quick story. I may or may not have shared this before. So okra is one of those small window crops. You have to harvest really often. I was going to say early and often, but you can harvest any time of day you want, but often, right? So this is a crop for sure, as Young Ben said, most of these, if not all. Bigger isn't always better. There may be a couple of varieties that are set to get larger, but for me, most of the varieties I grow, and even the ones in our shop, like you're talking about index finger for me size, right? And once okra gets going, I am harvesting almost daily. The story is, before I realized all of this, and I was growing okra because the little garden center I went to had okra plants. I put them in the backyard garden, and I had a gentleman here doing some work, some porch work, I think. And he said, oh, well, it looks like that okra is ready to pick. And I was like, and again, I'm not normally this way, but I definitely was this day. And I'm like, oh, no, it's fine. I'll pick it over the next day or two. Listen, that okra was ready to pick 3 days before he actually said that to me. Like, it was so long and big. And so when I finally went to pick it, maybe the next day, you want to talk about something tough and woody. Lesson learned. So okra is one of those things where as soon as you get in the morning, the flower that you see, I'm just saying you're going to see it in the morning, and that little bud of the okra, that next day, if not 2 days from then, it's going to be ready to harvest. So absolutely read the instructions for size to harvest, the expected size for that variety, and harvest based on them.
Well, you know what's crazy?
And wait, real quick.
Go ahead.
If you like raw okra, which I know a lot of people don't, and I know a lot of people don't like okra in general, you'll know immediately if you taste that okra when you have, again, that stringiness, that's the sign of that size was too large. And so now you know to come back in and harvest it when it's smaller.
Yeah, if I have the flower, usually I have to harvest it that day. It'll produce that fast. Maybe the next day. But you want them soft, small, and tender. And, people laugh because, I did a garden tour and I had one eggplant plant. But and this year I went crazy and I planted 2 okra plants.
Oh, wow.
2. And people laugh at me and they're like, why he only plant 1 or 2? And it's because I can't keep up with it. You know what I mean? Like it's right up there with the next one. It's easy to collect seed from because invariably you're going to have them left over. And then your okra plant's going to get 8, 9, 10 feet tall and you can't reach the top. So it's tough. So I only grow like 1 or 2 plants, but I try to get as many small, fuzzy okras as I can. And the trick with all of these is to go to the grocery store and look, we've said this many times, but look at how it's harvested. Like there's your indication, you don't ever go and see an okra that's, 6, 7, 8 inches long, right? You always go, or when you go to the freezer section, get them. They're just like, dime, maybe a nickel size okra. Well, there's a reason why. It's not because they're giving you immature okra. That's because that's when it tastes the best. So, yeah, and okra grows really fast, but it does take a while to get up and going. But once it does, boy, oh boy, you better be ready. And even if you have, and so I'm not a proponent necessarily of growing so much that you cannot manage the produce coming off of it, meaning you have to give it away or it'll be wasteful. But this is a crop that no matter what you do, you're going to have to give some away. It's just, it's crazy how much it can produce.
It's great for freezing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't like okra, grow a plant and put it in your chili. It changes the game.
I don't know if I've ever had okra in chili.
It's good. Yeah.
Okay. I believe you.
Just to put it out in the Ethernet right now, there's an issue going on where there's some lagging. So there's no need to comment. We can't do anything about it. So this is what we got. I can see it my end. I'm freezing and that's not normal. So I don't know what's going on. Okay, so the next one, and this seems like a no-brainer that you would know how to do, but beans. Beans is one. They can get away from you really quick.
And this is trickier because there are different varieties of beans, and I don't know if I've ever seen the name of a bean, a string bean, when you go to the grocery store. So I've seen some long beans at the grocery store, and this is, again, bigger isn't always better. Most varieties, I think, are best when you're harvesting them when they're smaller and more tender. There are a couple of varieties, I'm sure, that basically are set to let the bean go longer. I have the planters, the tier planters that I have. I did 7 tiers of green beans, and I was harvesting them. So it was probably 30 something plants, maybe even more, a couple of times a week. And that didn't even seem like enough. If I think about my front yard bed, it's 2 by 6 or something, putting beans in that, you're coming in at least once every 2 days to harvest those. And that's the tricky part too, because if you've not planted a lot of plants, you don't feel like, all right, well, I'll wait until I have more beans. Don't do that.
No,
don't wait.
Don't do that. So I've learned the hard way. You don't want any lumps in your beans at all.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want the bean to start to protrude
Yeah,
through
you don't
the
want to
shell,
see
yeah.
that. You know, when you open a can of green beans, do you see lumps? I don't. So it's funny. We talked about this before the show, and I went out the other day and got my first small micro harvest of green beans, and I decided to pull them way early, and they're not anywhere near the size that I would normally get, like lengthwise, but they were tender
Yeah.
the way I want them. So I think,
And the taste is there, right?
yeah, I don't know. I haven't eaten them yet, so I don't really like green beans fresh. You shoot me if you want, but I like canned green beans. What can I say? I will eat them freshly cooked in a few dishes, but for the most part, I can all my green beans. But I did harvest them much smaller than I have in the past, and just by in my hands feeling them, I was messing with them. I was bending them and just pulling on them and massaging them and stuff. I was being kind of weird. But they definitely,
Clearly,
yeah.
yeah.
But because I'm trying something new, and it seemed like it was really the tenderness that we were looking for. Now, this is like the last one. It's easy to save beans because you're going to get some over mature beans.
Yeah.
But what I do is if I want to save the beans, which I typically don't, or because I will by accident anyways, I'll let one of them go, and once I get a handful of them, then I'll go through, and let's say I had to be away from the garden for a couple days or something, and I come out and it's bad. I'll pull every single one of those beans off and just feed them to the chickens, like right away. They go to the chickens. I don't worry about them, and then that kind of revamps that plant to start growing again. And I just have to tell myself, okay, I got to get out there and I got to do it. But it can be kind of grueling,
Yeah.
There's an argument for beans to limit how much you grow, because the less you grow, the better quality you can keep up with in your garden.
Yeah. Leonard, there's an episode that we need to work through. So we have been proponents of, if you have open space, put in a bush bean, seed. And I support that, but I also support keeping in mind how easy it is to get to the things that you need to harvest quickly and often, right? So having beans all in a similar place makes it a lot easier for you to manage them. And I will eat canned green beans because I grew up on canned green beans, but I would prefer to have all of my green beans fresh. I actually probably prefer fresh green beans, meaning out of the garden into a skillet. Next would be, fresh green beans that are then blanched and then frozen. And final would be canned green beans. But based on volumes that I've gotten, sometimes it's been easier to, can them and be done with it. I've never been able to keep up with, once I have a good bean harvest, eating them fresh. They keep in the refrigerator for, a few days before they start to turn.
Right.
But I look at that and say, I'd rather have them off the plant and figuring out what I'm going to do with them and allowing more to produce than leaving them on the plant with hopes of I'll figure it out as I watch them, get long and hard. And so yeah, it's, beans are probably one of the more satisfying crops to grow. Bush beans will get you to that place sooner. Pole beans are like a workhorse, though.
Well, bush beans will give you a backache, so
yeah,
there's that.
there is that. Yeah.
Okay, we got to keep it moving because this one is multi-tiered. Okay, so the next one is, again, it's multi-tiered, and this is going to cover your squashes. So tier one is going to be your yellow squash, your zucchini. White bush scallop squash, available in the seed shop. One of our favorites. Just your typical summer type squashes. And then tier two will be your butternut squashes and stuff like that. So tier one's pretty simple, right?
I think smaller is just going to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I missed one the other day, and I came out and it's like 2 feet long. And I came back and I brought it in, and always like, that's a squash. And I'm like, yeah, that's a squash, but just go ahead and make zucchini bread out of it. You know what I mean? It's not terrible, but it's going to have a lot more seeds in it, stuff like that. So you're exactly right. You know, if you go to a grocery store, or better yet, go to a farmer's market, you only see squash that are, 6 inches long, zucchinis as
Yep.
well. You don't see 1 2 foot zucchinis. It is pretty cool though. I'm not going to lie. When you go out there and you got like a 3 foot zucchini laying on the ground, that's about 4 inches in diameter. And you're like, damn right. It is a pretty
I have
cool
a picture
feeling.
from my Facebook from a bunch of years ago where I have the squash zucchini and I have it next to my arm, my
Yeah.
forearm, and it's like the same size. And that was before I realized when I cut into it that it didn't taste good. And I still didn't put together that it was like, because it was the size of my arm,
Yeah, because that's what
So much
that's
to
what you
learn.
think you would want, is you think you would
Yeah,
want like the
yeah.
biggest is the best, but that's not necessarily the case. So, and when they start producing, it's going to be fast and oftentimes almost daily to every other day harvest. So, just try and catch them early.
Yeah.
So pretty simple. Okay. Winter squashes. So this is your butternut squash, spaghetti squash, winter squash, honey nut squash. I'm going to lump my personal favorite squash in, desi squash. If you've never grown a desi squash, grow it. Okay. Just please grow it. I'd love to get some seeds in the seed shop, but the supplier doesn't have them. So there's that. But there's a time when to harvest these, and there's a time not to harvest them. So we've got to figure that out. Do you have any idea what that time is, Batavia?
I don't know how you've set this up, but
I didn't really set anything up.
yeah. So these are I don't know about the desi squash, but the others, you want the skin on these, which is the difference between your summer squash and your winter squash, which is often grown for storage, to be tough, to be hard. You don't want it to be tender like we would a zucchini or a yellow squash. This, whatever color the squash is supposed to be ripening to, that's what you want.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I can't think of a winter squash that continues to ripen once it's off the vine.
They will, we've got a lot of squashes. Oh, and by the way, Seminole pumpkins are in this one too. They will continue a little bit, but nothing, crazy. That they, and you're exactly right. It's the color, which, it's funny. A lot of things in life, you shouldn't go by the color. And what I'm referring to is when I was a fisheries biologist, I was in charge of fish ID on the East Coast. And we always said, never go by coloration ever, because you can have anomalies, right? And it's the same thing here. You start, the squash starts, and it's like a greenish tint. Not green, except for your winter squash and your Seminole pumpkins, but you know what I mean. It'll have like a greenish tint, and then it'll turn like a lighter tint. And then it will start to turn that more golden yellow. Not totally golden, but the more solid yellow. That's when it's go time. Okay, so anything after the green and in the yellow is perfect. When it's pale, it's a little bit off, but it's not terrible. But again, and I don't like that they're called squash, because they're almost like a potato consistency. And I think
Yeah, I wouldn't have said that.
well,
Maybe closer to the sweet potato family.
yeah,
Maybe?
yeah, maybe a little
Yeah,
bit,
yeah.
The reason why I say that is because I think there's something with the starches forming in there too, because it is a more starchy vegetable. But if
It's definitely more of the pumpkin, more like pumpkin than.
yeah,
But pumpkins are kind of similar to sweet. Yeah. But I mean, unless you have an orange squash, winter squash,
Yeah.
right? So I grew honey nut squash, which is like a smaller version of your butternut squash, and those are going to get orange. And it's one of those interesting things because they're small to begin with. The honey nut is compared to how large your butternut squash needs to get, and then it's similar to a tomato in that a tomato gets to size and then it changes to the color it's going to change to. A squash is going to do that same thing. It's going to get to size, then it's going to go through that process of ripening to whatever that color is going to be.
Yeah.
And I've taken squash off the vine where it had some still remnants of green and the squash is supposed to get to orange, and it's just not been that tasty.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I talk about like how, and a lot of those squashes, yours, I think some of the smaller ones and some of the patty pan like squashes, it's not as long as a butternut squash when it comes to harvest time. I'm actually looking at the calendar and saying, oh, my window may have passed. You know?
Yeah, you're pretty damn close.
Yeah.
So we've got one more that's an honorable mention, but I'm throwing one in last minute because I did forget. And melons. We've got to talk about melons real quick. And once you learn, real simple. So I'm going to make it real simple real quick. What you want to do when you look at the melon, it doesn't matter how big it is. Doesn't matter what color it is. Doesn't matter what the belly of it looks like. What you want to do is look at the base of it. And at the stem, there's a pigtail. And when that pigtail turns brown, harvest. Okay, that's all you need to do. And then you got it. It doesn't matter anything else about what the melon looks like. That's what you want. So just keep that in mind as you're growing them. You may get a melon. Like one year we grew one that was like 48 pounds. We weighed it. And I was like, my God, when's it going to be ready? But I had to wait for that pigtail. And damn if it wasn't good. Okay. So let's do this. Let's do the question of the day. And then we'll come back and we'll do the honorable mention. We don't usually do that, but I want to make sure that we get the question of the day. And the honorable mention is kind of an honorable mention. Okay. So before we do, let's do this. Get yourself the planner app. It's a sponsor of the show. It's very useful. When you're working into timing out your garden, this is going to help you because inside of it, it has all of the plant profiles that will tell you, hey, this melon's going to take 80 days. These carrots are going to take 70 days. You know, on this show, we always add a little bit more, but by the books. And so that will give you a good idea to get you started into testing to see if things are ready to harvest. It has a drag and drop interface, companion and combative planting, all of that good stuff. Get yourself a healthy discount on the lifetime membership. You can use it on your computer. Love using it on my computer. On your tablet and your PC. So make sure that you get yourself the planner app. It's available on the Google and Apple Play Store. And use the link below to get yourself that discount. Okay. Let's do the question. Okay, so this one comes from Esther.
Hey, Esther.
I think I said it right. If I didn't, I do sincerely apologize. She asks, and this is from the Facebook community garden, says, best advice for natural pesticides in zone 8B, if that helps. Zones don't matter. She says, it's hot and humid already, LOL, and the bugs are getting busy. I lost 2 broccoli plants to pests, and now they're going after my kale. Hand picking them off and spraying them off hasn't slowed them at all. My companion planting with onions all around the bed also did nada.
So, did Esther plant these broccoli plants at the right time?
I don't know.
I don't know how old the question is.
It's not very old.
Yeah. I mean, this time of year, I'd imagine from what the area that she's describing, it seems like it's pretty hot for those plants.
Well, so therein lies the reason why zones don't matter, because my zone 8B is different than Oregon's zone 8B. They have cooler summers, but not as cold winters. So that's why zones don't matter. So if we take that out of the equation.
She said hot and humid. I mean, that's the thing I'm focusing on.
Yeah, hot and humid. But that refers to bolting. You can absolutely knock down pests and keep them off of your plants in the heat. You just got to stay on top of it. I'm assuming when she says spray with water, spray, that she means with water, spraying them off physically.
Oh, okay.
So hand picking is first
Paramount.
round of defense. Obviously, that's a great way. You can absolutely get on top of them. The problem is the eggs. So it's a life cycle. They get on there, they mate, they lay eggs. You can kill the adults, but you can't kill the eggs. You can, but you can't hardly see them if you can see them at all. So when you're saying natural, Batavia, what I'm assuming is no organic pesticides at all. Is that what you're reading in between the lines here?
I'm not sure. I mean, maybe we can answer it in that way. I think the reason why I focus on the timing and whether or not this is the time to be growing those plants is, are they weaker based on them trying to fight their way through the potential heat? And it could be a losing battle given that, pests have decided to attack these plants because they're weaker. The hand picking, if it's like worms or things like that, absolutely, that's going to be the way. Um, I would also consider, and at this point, broccoli, I mean, it's almost a good thing that it's broccoli because you only need to get it to a certain point, right? This isn't going to be in your garden forever. Broccoli heads are hopefully going to be created, and then you can pull the plants. Um, I think if she's saying that she's spraying water on them, maybe they're aphids, which, I love, and you think they're nothing of a pest. I love to talk about how bad I have aphids in my garden and how a nuisance they are. So it's hard to tell when we don't know what pest. But I think our general default response is always going to be to hand pick them if you're able to see them. And I think spraying them with water to spray them off the plants, I mean, it's going to be a daily ritual again until you get to the plant to the point of you're ready to harvest it.
Yeah. Pests have been an issue for me for a long time, and still until I started using organic pesticides, and that really changed the game. Otherwise you're really going to have to look into like traps if you don't want to use organic. I'll get into organic pesticides in a second. But you'll have to look into traps, hand picking. I'm glad she brought up the companion planting didn't help because companion planting sucks. I said it. Shoot me, unsubscribe. I don't care. It just sucks. It's complicated and it doesn't work. Not for pests necessarily. I can't think of anything else other than, like I said, traps and stuff like that. Now, as far as organic pesticides go, if it's a caterpillar or a soft-bodied animal, I use BT, Bravo Tango. That's Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a naturally occurring substance. You spray it when you see them. You come back 7 to 10 days, you do it again. If they're not coming back, you're good. If they are, then do it one more time because you're cleaning up the eggs. And that's the whole thing with this is the eggs. You're not breaking the life cycle after, one treatment. If it's a hard-bodied insect, what I use is neem oil. It's natural. I'll spray, and then I'll do the same thing 7 to 10 days. I'll come back again, and I'll do that, and that usually takes care of it. I do both of these treatments in the evening when the pollinators are gone and stuff like that so that it can sit on the plant. The morning comes, they'll come and they'll chew on it, and it messes up their digestive tract so they can't eat anymore and they die. Other than that, you can look for like specific varieties. You almost have to do a multi-tiered. If you don't want to use any pesticides at all, organic or man-made, you're going to have to do multi-tiered approach, and you're still going to struggle, in my opinion, but that's going to be variety, hand-picking, traps, crop rotation, tilling the soil is really important. And the whole thing about no-till is problematic because what happens, especially with like squash vine borer, is the worm goes into the plant and then it hatches, it comes out, it lays its eggs in the soil, and then it releases from the soil. But if you till that soil, you move all that up to the surface. The birds, the insects and stuff can get to it. They're not at the right depth anymore. You can freeze them. They can burn, whatever you do. So there's a lot of different approaches to it. But what I'll say is you look on social media and you'll see people saying, I use nothing in my garden and I never have a pest, ever. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, if you got kids in the room, cover your ears because cover their ears. There's no other way to say it. That's bullshit. You're using something. You know what I mean? It's because pests are everywhere. You get them every season. You're going to get a pest. The only pest that I can get on top of with hand picking is Japanese beetles. And that's constant morning and night hand picking for weeks to get them under control.
So Japanese beetles and then the cabbage worm. a lot of y'all know that I use covers in my garden. I don't cover my broccoli because, generally speaking, the time of season I'm growing it, it's earlier in the season, and I have had some small damage again that I've had to come in from the cabbage butterfly, that I've had to hand pick the worms from, but I can normally get through and harvest broccoli before those plants come under attack. Now, my other greens that I'm growing, and it's every other green basically that they attack, and the cabbage butterfly is in my garden from the beginning of the season, early in the spring, all the way through like first frost. So there is no like reprise for me for that. But every year, to your point, even with I'm not spraying anything on these plants. I'm covering them. I'm gonna have 1 or 2 outbreaks every season.
Yeah.
Like heart stop.
And
right?
that's because they're hatching from the soil a lot of times.
Well, that's because at some point I am not as diligent and I'm uncovering those beds, and guess who jumps in? Or when I first planted them, I didn't follow my rule and cover the plants immediately, right? So that's again for the cabbage butterfly in particular. There are other things like snails, that are sitting in the soil that give me problems. So there isn't a pest-free garden. Even with some of my coverings, again, if aphids were a problem, I'm going to have aphids underneath, so I try to be careful around, and this is harder for me, but I try to be careful around how much airflow I have between these plants. And yeah, it's a continued effort. Now, remember, I'm also growing some of these plants during an off season, during a non-ideal time too. And I pay for that quite literally, but I like it.
Well, another thing you can do too is you can get a spray bottle with dish soap in it and spray. That will help. It desiccates some of the insects and will kill them. But again, it's not natural. So it's just how you want to do it. I know there's a lot of people that don't like pesticides of any sort, and I get it. But what I had to tell myself eventually was our food system was built off of pesticides. If there wasn't pesticides, we wouldn't eat. End of story. That would be the end of it. So what's the happy medium here? Like, how can we be satisfied with what we're doing? And it's about managing your pests and not pre-treating and constantly treating. Like big farms and stuff, they just treat no matter what.
Yeah.
And they also, you have to understand it, the insecticide is baked into the seed for big farms, and we don't have that. So we have to manage a different way. But
yeah, one of the things that, kind of like, what's the happy medium? Like, I'm glad you framed it up that way. I take great joy in realizing that most of what comes out of my garden, because we're not talking about transplants that have been treated with something before I bring them home, but what I'm pulling out of my garden, like, this is one of the few opportunities that I have to consume something that hasn't been sprayed. Even when I'm buying the organic insert vegetable, right? We know that there are kind of limits to how much spray, if you will, a organic farm can use before they're no longer considered organic, right? And then it's all of conventional vegetables and foods that I buy, which I still do, right? So it a little bit more effort, right? A little bit more effort when it comes to being proactive and fighting against pests, and a little less effort when it comes to having a schedule or a ritual for natural sprays and remedies when it comes to pest control, because I believe those things are natural. I'm not doubting that BT is a natural occurrence, but if I can get away in a season and not have to do that, it just brings me a bit of joy as a gardener.
Absolutely.
And I have, similar to what you've said, if we're looking at complete loss, I got some bottles of this stuff somewhere around here, it has been in my cart and purchased at some point. But I've been fortunate, I think, and diligent when it comes to a lot of these plants. And then some point, for some plants, I call time of death on them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens.
So there you go. If you'd like to be like Esther, you may do